3rd gen Tacoma slider installation. So we're going to be putting a set of sliders on a short bed Tacoma, but the process of installing on a long bed or an extended cab is actually the same. So we're going to open up the hardware pack and see what we got here for the hardware, and we'll take a look at what we got. 1/2 inch 13 grade 8s, and then we have these large oversized frame washers, very large heavy duty washers. The sliders actually mount on the truck very simply. All of our mounts have holes in them for these 1/2 inch bolts. So a large frame washer, you're going to have 6 of these. 1/2 inch grade 8 13 nuts, you're going to have a total of 12 of these. 1/2 inch 13 grade 8 bolts, 1.5 inch long, you have 12 of these. 1/2 inch lock washers or split washers, you have a total of 12 of these. 1/2 inch grade 8 L9 washers, you have a total of 24 of these. So one of the things we're going to do in the front is we're going to start off with this little cover. There's a plastic cover here that comes off, and then also this wiring harness here is on a little capture point on the frame. So we're going to pop this out, and then we're going to pop the wiring harness free so we can pull that out to help clear the foot, the gusset. So I'm going to use a little pop tool to come in here. Comes right out. And then this piece here, that's loose now. That's going to give us access. So when we slide this foot up, this window is going to line up with that. So we're going to be able to put a bolt through. And then this is going to riding over the top of the gusset that we have. So before we can put the middle foot in, we're going to have to pull this little module off. And the module is actually held on by 2 studs that go through the frame, and there's 2 nuts on the other side that have a 12mm hex head. So use your 12mm to remove those. So now we're going to remove the module that's on the back side of the frame, and it's held on with these little studs. Comes right off. Now that module is loose. You hang on to that, so we're going to reuse these. So now we've removed those bolts or the nuts on the other side. So now this module is just loose, and it can come out and just be set off to the side like that. And that's giving us access to this hole that we're going to be putting the big washer through and putting our nuts on. So for the front foot, to get to the inside of the frame, there's actually a plastic cover that Toyota puts on the inside of the frames. And it's held in place by a single bolt in the front that's captured into the frame. And so the bolt head itself is just a 12mm bolt. It's very simple. Come in with your small extension, get on that 12mm bolt, and go ahead and remove that bolt. Now you shouldn't have to pull this brake line connector, this union for the brake lines. That can just stay put. The plastic piece will actually fall away or pull away, allowing us to get in there. So now we've got full access to that mounting point that's inside the frame. That is right there. You see my finger inside? So we're going to bring the bolts in through here, and I can put my hand back there to tighten the bolt up. So when this is being bolted on, there's a bolt coming through here, and this very large washer that's going to come in back here like this. And we want to give ourselves a little extra room on here, so when the nut is on our bolt here, that we're not hitting the soft line or the brake line. So we're going to do what's called a soft bend. We're going to move it with our hand. And so I'm going to come in up above on this upper one, and just using my hand, my fingers, I'm going to bend that line up a little bit to create an extra clearance, and then I'll bend the one below it. So that now, just by hand, I made it so the nut's going to clear and there's no issues with that. Lines are still connected to the hard lines. Everything's fine. I didn't use a sharp tool or anything that would create a dent or anything that creates a stress riser in the line. Simply by bending it with my bare hands, I created that space that's going to allow that to fit with no problem. So the rear bolt's going to come through the outside of the frame and come through here, and then we'll have an oversized washer, lock washer, and nut right back here as well. And you can reach back between the fuel tank and the frame to put that in. So the washer stack for bolting these onto your truck, you're going to take the bolt, you're going to put a washer to support the head of the bolt. That's going to go through the slider, through the frame, and then the back side of the frame, you're going to put the large oversized washer, you're going to put a lock washer or split washer, and then the grade 8 nut is going to go on. So the bolt's going to go in. When we walk through, we're going to put the oversized heavy washer on. We're going to put our lock washer on, and we're going to come in with our nut and put the nut in place. And then we'll tighten that down here in a minute with the tools. So to get your hand back in there, me personally, I mean, I don't want to try to get my hand smashed back there, so I'm just going to loosen this mount. These brake lines are on their flex connection right here, so they actually can go up and down. See how this can go up and down now? I'm going to pop it off this mount here, and it's going to give me some extra room to stick my hand inside. Stick my hand inside there. There we go. And I can reach back there with no problem. And then to the front. All right, so our module has this stud and this stud that goes through the holes. Now, the hole here is wide open on the frame to the backside. The hole here is now blocked by the gusset and the main support that's on the other side here. So that's actually to our advantage. And the reason for that is that we need to actually have the module, this little bracket, be higher than that point on the bolt. And that's easy to do because we're going to take the tip of this bolt head and see how it's like recessed there. That tip of that bolt head is actually going to poke through the frame and rest on the back side of the slider support bracket. And then the other side is actually going to go through, and then we'll put the bolt on the other side. And this is going to be sitting a little crooked. This one thread's going to hold it on here. This other one's going to hold it. It's going to locate it into that hole. The hole will keep this from moving around. And that single stud is more than enough to hold this module in place for all of our uses. The other thing that we want to make sure, this is the time you want to make sure that this brake line is not rubbing on the nut or on the washer. And this line right now doesn't even if I move it back and forth, it's not touching the washer, and it's definitely clear of the head of the bolt, or the head of the nut. So that's nice and clear just because we did that slight little bend with our hands previously. This line snapped back in. This is ready to have the bolt put back in. And then of course the cover will come back in, and we'll put the bolt in with the cover back in place once we're done. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put the module in and put the single nut on the other side with this other stud resting in the hole, creating the bridge that we need to clear the top of the nut. That. So the stud is now inside this hole. It's locked in. The bolt is on the back side here. The nut is on the back side. And this module is completely locked in place. That thing is not moving. So this works perfectly fine by letting it sit on top of that. It's creating the bridge, allowing the back side of the module to clear the nut and the bolt for the slider. So this is completely back in place. So now I'm going to go ahead and start putting the parts back in here to put the cover back on. So we have, on each slider, there's 3 optional bolts that you can add. Now you don't have to, they work fine without them, but we added them for anybody that wants them for really hardcore use. So these holes are underneath the frame on all 3 of the mounts, and we include extra hardware. And all you would do is drill a 1/2-inch hole, and you'd put those through, and then you'd put the lock washer nut on it from above. And that locks the lower part of the sliders into the frame. Again, it's optional. There's 3 per side. We provide all the hardware so you can do that. but it's not necessarily, you don't have to do it for general use. And so like our truck for a long time, we ran it, we never actually fully bolted it in because we didn't want to drill the holes in the frame. Some people don't want to drill holes in the frame. That's perfectly fine. If you're okay with it, go ahead, and now's the time to punch your 1/2 inch holes in there. Now you got the slider in place, then put your bolts in there, put your nuts on, and you're done. Just remember that if you do drill through the frame, make sure you put a little bit of fingernail polish or paint of some sort. We have a tip on our YouTube channel about using fingernail polish for installations, but just to protect your steel from any kind of rust. So optional points, go ahead and drill it in. Both sides have that. You can put them in at any time. Now we're on the passenger side, and on the center foot, you're going to have this plastic cover that's in the way. So we're going to pull the cover off real quick so we can get a better shot for the foot when we put the foot on. So these two bolts, they're like a 6mm bolt, but they have a 10mm head on them. So you're going to use a 10mm wrench to take this plastic cover off. It's just covering this piece here. We're going to install our slider, and then we're going to come back and put the cover back on afterwards. We're going to notch the cover when we do, but for now we're just going to go ahead and put our slider on. So just like the other side, we're going to pull this plastic cover off. It is a bolt with a 12mm head on it. Just like the other side. This piece comes right off. So just like the other side, we have this plastic piece covering this hole. We're going to go ahead and use our tool. You can use a screwdriver or whatever, but I'm going to remove this part here. Cool. So when sticking your hand back inside there, it's how do you hold all the hardware? What I do is actually set the hardware inside the frame so I can find it as needed as I'm installing it. So I'm going to put my hand up in there, and then I can grab the pieces and put them up as I need it. Once you have all the bolts in place, just come back and go ahead and tighten them all up. So these bolts are grade 8, 1/2 inch 13. The torque settings for that is going to be 106 pounds dry or 80 pounds wet. So if you're using a thread locker, it would be 80 foot-pounds. If it's going on dry like these are, we're going to use 106 pounds on the torque wrench for torquing all 6 of the grade 8 bolts that are on here. And if you ever have questions on what torque a bolt should be, it's actually common knowledge online. You can look it up as far as there's engineer tools that you can use that give you the exact torque settings for bolts for either wet or dry, metric, whatever. So it's really easy to look that stuff up. But just so you have, 106 is the foot-pounds on these. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these. This is the plastic cover. It just helps protect that plug, that electrical plug. The slider now protects this whole lower area here. So this is actually in the way. The slider is going to guard this. So we're going to cut this corner out. And in doing that, I'm just going to use a cutoff disc to cut it. You can cut it with a knife or whatever. Just as a tip, I'm going to go ahead and drill a 3/8 inch hole that I'm going to cut to. That's going to create a radius that I'll actually cut to the radius. That removes the stress riser, so there's less chances of it ever wanting to crack or anything like that. But you're just going to cut that area out, and then this piece is ready to go back on. And essentially that is the cut right about the middle. I'm going to cut a little bit of an angle, but otherwise it's going to be just this corner is coming off to clear the slider. This piece now comes off. I have a nice radius in that corner, and now I can trim this up with my knife. This piece is now ready to go back on the truck. So it's going to go back up. It now clears. Again, the slider now is really protecting this very well. Anything want to come up, it's going to hit the slider leg here first. So go ahead and put these little 6mm threaded 10mm head bolts in place. Last we're going to do is come back, put this frame cover back on. Carrying cover's on, installation's done.